All right, hello everyone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a quick video on, we'll see how quick I can make it, a quick video on responsive design. And basically what I'll do is I'll take my portfolio page here, and right now I've removed all of the responsive design styles. So right now if you resize the window, you'll see that it looks terrible, right? It's not responding responsively. It's impossible to read. And it's really not how it's supposed to look. So here is the live website with the responsive styles in, and this is really what the goal is. When you resize, it responds to the window size and still looks readable and usable to the user. And so our end goal here is a responsive site like this, so you can see the 3 columns get pushed down to 1 column, for example. And so what I'll do is I'll walk us through that. So the first thing I want to do is I want you to use Mozilla Firefox, and I want you to install Mozilla Web Developer if you don't already have it. So if you don't already have it, it's the second link if you Google Mozilla Web Developer. You can just add it on, click Add to Firefox. So I already have it. And what that does is it adds this bar right here that I'm pointing at to Firefox. And what's really cool is if you do resize, click the resize menu, and then click display window size and title, that'll show you as you resize the that'll show you the sort of running. I'm sorry, what did I do? Gosh. It'll show you, it should show you, yeah, the running total for the size of the window. There we go. All right, so let me do that again. There it is. So you can kind of see it's a running total. So right now this is 1507 pixels wide. We can keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. And so this will give you a really good and helpful indicator as to the width of your screen. As you move, you can kind of see it move with it. So that's what Mozilla Web Developer does, and that's probably the most helpful tool that we'll use in responsive design. Now, responsive design really relies on a very simple CSS command called the media query. So if you Google CSS media query, you'll see the W3 Schools site will give you it'll give you the code for the media query. We would want to change this to max width instead of min width. And I'll explain the difference between those two as we continue to move forward. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through my process of doing this, which is not probably the be-all and end-all process of doing this, but it'll give you sort of a good background for how to implement responsive design. So one thing to note is, and I'll put this link in the video, but there are resources that will tell you the width and the height, the default width and height of a lot of different devices. So for example, iPad Portrait is 1024 pixels wide versus the iPhone 6 Plus, that's the phone I have. The width is, where's the width? The width for landscape is 414 pixels. Can't find the height. Anyways, these are sort of default. These are sort of default widths for lots of different devices. And I don't actually, since I didn't teach mobile first responsive, I don't actually use mobile first responsive, and so I don't really use these breakpoints all that much. I more go by when it starts to look unusable is when I'll start to resize things. And so I feel like we can even, so for example, once we get to this point, these columns are probably unreadable, right? So if you pulled this up on a phone or an iPad or something like that, these columns would be unreadable, and we would probably want to collapse the columns into single columns or full rows. Other things that are breaking, we can see that these navigation bar is kind of breaking, right? It used to be top right, sort of floated right, but the smaller we get, it kind of breaks. And so what I like to do is I like to redesign the site based on when it starts to break. So instead of redesigning the site for each of these different devices, redesigning the site from biggest to smallest as it breaks. And so the reason why I do that is once you make a change in the responsive design, so for example let's say at 900 pixels, I'm going to move this navigation bar. Once I make that change at 900 pixels, it's going to remain or cascade down regardless of how small I make the screen, right? So, and that's really helpful. So the idea in my methodology is try to introduce as few responsive styles as possible. So let's take a look at, this is the actual site, the live site that does have responsive built in, and let's see where it breaks. So it looks like it breaks right there. So let's display window size. Right at 900 pixels it breaks. And basically what I've done is I've changed the navigation bar, and I've centered everything in the header. So basically, Chris Lamb, all of that stuff is centered, our navigation bar is centered, and it looks like all of our rows are now 100% width, including the footer is now 100% width. And so basically it looks like there's one main layout change. And so as we walk through, the first thing we'll do is we'll make changes to the layout, and then we'll make any subsequent changes to the typography if necessary, images and typography if necessary. But the main thing you want to do is you want to get your layout looking okay on across multiple devices. So again, why did I choose 900 pixels as a responsive breakpoint? We can look, if you look in the title here, once we get to 900, sorry, let me reload. Once we get to 900, you'll see it, you'll see the nav bar start to get really kind of too close to this element. And so sort of as a design principle, it no longer adheres to the principle of proximity or alignment or a lot of different things. And so what I've done on this site is I've just centered it all. So let's implement that first. So what I can do is I can pull up my style sheet, and I'm going to pull up my index file as well. So what we're looking at now is the HTML and the CSS from these two sites, from this site. And basically what I want to do is I want to take my nav, and I no longer want it floated, right? But let's take a look at my navigation styles first. So my nav right now is floated right, and this header, I believe, is floated left. Okay, so we've got a float left and float right on my nav and my header. So basically what I want to do is I want to remove those floats, and I want to center all of the text, right? So let's see if we can do that. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these media queries out. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a media query. So again, to get the code, you can just Google CSS media query. And I'm going to copy this whole line of code and I'm going to paste it in. But I want to change this to max width instead of min width. Again, we want to, because we're working from largest to smallest, we're going to use max width. If we were designing from smaller to bigger, we would use min width. I am going to change this to, I believe I said 900 pixels. And I'm going to close it here. So this is pretty magical, actually. This little bit of code right here at media screen, max width, 900 pixels. So basically what we do now is we treat this like a whole new CSS style sheet. And because it's cascading, we can override things using this style sheet. And so the first thing we want to override is our nav and our header. We want to remove the float. So I think we can do float none. Okay, so we had said earlier we wanted to remove the float on our nav and header once we got to 900 pixels wide. So let's go back to, so this is our page, and I'm going to refresh, and hopefully at 900 pixels, so again keep your eye here to when this number hits 900, something should happen. There we go. So something happened, right? So at 900 pixels we've removed the float, which is great, but it's still not centered correctly. The H1 looks okay. That looks okay, but the H2 doesn't look very good. So let's see. And the reason why that's happening is because I've got styles on my header, H2, that is causing that. And so one of the reasons is we've got a margin top of negative 1.65. That's not causing that. Perhaps we can just center all of the text in the navigation and header, and that'll move everything over. So now we're looking almost perfect. The only thing now that's happening is the navigation bar doesn't really, it seems to be off a little bit. And so let's see what other styles currently exist on the nav. So these are styles that were there originally. And I think it's probably because we've got padding left happening, 24 pixels. So that's why this whole thing is being pushed over 24 pixels. So what we can do is we can open up a new style called nav. What was that on? ULLI. And then we can remove the padding left. And now we're centered. And we can add in the padding to the right instead. Okay, so now we've got 24 pixels in between each of these list items, but we've changed the padding from the left to the right instead, because we didn't want to indent the first element 24 pixels, otherwise it would throw off sort of the centered nature of the navigation bar. Okay, so we've removed. So again, just to kind of show you, it's almost like a brand new style sheet inside of this media query. You open up the media query and you close it here, and inside of it, it's just like you would have normal styles. You can add or remove any number of styles. So the only thing that I've changed, it looks like, is I've definitely added these border tops and bottoms to the navigation bar to kind of, I think, create some proximity, to create some space or visual space between the navigation bar and the header. So to do that, I can, again, create another style called nav, and we can do border top 1 pixel, looks like 1 pixel dotted gray, and border bottom 1 pixel dotted gray. Okay, so it looks like we've added, it's pretty close. It looks like I actually added more space between these list items than just 24 pixels. I don't know how much space it is. I'll just guess 34 maybe. It's closer. Looks like even more. 44 maybe? Yeah, that looks about right. Almost exactly perfect. Okay, so we're looking good now. So again, just to sort of reiterate what we've done, we have our original style had our nav floated right and our header floated left. Once we get to 900 pixels, boom, we removed the floats, so float none. We aligned all of the text center. We moved the padding from the left to the right on our list items, and then we added a border top and border bottom to our navigation bar. Okay, so our sort of header area is looking good. The only difference now is that these 3 columns are now spanning the entire screen. So we can do that by taking a look at what those 3 items are. So it looks like they're called left column, middle column, and right column, which makes perfect sense. So what I can do now is I can pull up right column or left column, middle column, and right column inside of my media query here, 900 pixel media query, and I can just say width 100%. So previously, if we look up previously to where left column is, they're each left column is 31.998%. And so it's 32%, and so I'm changing the width to 100%. And so let's see what that does. I'm going to refresh now. We're looking good. So the only weird thing is that I actually, the way that this is set up is I've got my middle and right column wrapped in another div. This is like an old school web design trick because I developed this maybe almost 10 years ago or so, or I don't remember when I developed this. You no longer have to do that, but I did that. So if we look at why this is happening, I'll tell you why this is happening. So middle column is in an ID called right wrap. And that width is 66.66%. So what's happening is we made the middle and right column 100%, but it's 100% of that 66%. So what we need to do then is we need to add the ID right wrap to our media query, and we can refresh, and there we go. So pretty much done with the header and the main content. Really the only thing left is the footer and sort of making everything in the footer one column as well. And so we can kind of see, let's see how the footer is set up. So in our footer, we've got, sorry guys, I haven't looked at this site in years. Okay, so in our footer, we've got right there, sheesh. We've got 3 columns: left column connect, middle column connect, and right column connect. Right. This was a really old school way of designing. Not the best way to design now these days, but it will just have to do. And then we have the middle and right columns in a div called right container connect. So what we're going to do is we're going to add all of those right here. So right, let's go, left column connect. So these are, let me just show you what these are. This is left column connect. This is middle column connect. This is right column connect. So these are the footer columns. Left column connect, right, middle column connect, and right column connect. And then we also had a container. Same problem as we ran into previously. Right container connect. Right container connect. So we want everything, all of that to be 100% too. So we'll refresh, and as you can see, we've got everything is 100%. Now, we do have some issues going on with the height of some of these elements, and we'll take care of that in a second here. But I do want to show you that we've got everything 100% essentially. And so what's great is we really only have one responsive breakpoint right now, max width 900, but it doesn't matter how small the screen gets, it's going to look okay until we get to this point. Right now it's really, this is breaking, and we'll have to fix some other things like that. But that's 335 pixels all the way up till 561 pixels. We're looking pretty good. And so you can kind of resize and resize and resize until it breaks right there at 522. So we would probably want to introduce another breakpoint at 522. So then you can just add in your media query again, and instead change that to 522 pixels, because we know that that's where our navigation bar breaks, right? So let's see how I handle it here. I think what I do is I just make the font smaller, the font for everything smaller. So I wonder if I can use percentages. So if I'm at 522, if I make header nav, I wonder if I can use percentages. Let's try 75%. Yeah, so you can kind of just use percentages. And so now I've made the font smaller, and it breaks again at 441. But we'll take care of that in a bit here. So what I think I'll do now is I'll fix this footer. So it looks like the problem is that the background image is not, for some reason, is not. Yeah, there we go. I think it's because of this height here. I wonder if we change this to min height. Nope. Yep. That's why. So the height on our footer is not tall enough to span this whole deal. So what we can do is we can add a style in our responsive breakpoint for 900 pixels. We can change the height to 1500 pixels, just make it bigger. And that's probably too big, right? So let's change it to 1200 pixels. There we go. That's a little better. And that looks fine all the way down. Yep. Great. So that fixes that. So we're looking pretty close to where we need to be. I'm going to wrap this up. So what we can do now is we can do a few things. So we saw that it broke at 522 pixels, and we fixed that by making the font smaller, right? So at 523, it's that big. At 521, it's that big. What we can actually do is we can probably just change all of the font, make all of the font sizing proportional. No, that didn't work. Oh, that's confusing. Let's not get into that can of worms. So we'll change the header and the nav to 75%. What we can also do with the nav is we can sort of reduce the amount of space between these LI items, right? Because right now we've got a padding right of 44 pixels. We can go and reduce the space to back to 24 pixels. Oops. What am I doing? There we go. Maybe even smaller, 14 pixels. And so it seems to break again at 461. So we can either reduce this font size, see if we can't get it to break. Yeah, I'll stick with 75 here. And then what we can do is at 4, where was it breaking? 431, so 431, we can, so it's just kind of like trial and error, guess and check, the old guess and check method. We can make the font size even smaller, so 75% of 75%. Oh, that's not working. Let's change this to 50%. It seems good until we get, and let's, oh, you know why this padding right wasn't changing? That's why. There we go. And that should do us all the way till we resize. Yeah. So the idea then is to really go from largest to smallest and see where things are starting to break design principles. So at 900, it broke a design principle, so we sort of renegotiated or reconfigured. And then we made the font smaller in the header at 522. Then we made it even smaller at 4. And then we can go all the way down to 335 and it still fits. So we don't really have to do anything now. We can kind of leave it as is. We would probably want to resize some of the fonts. Some of the fonts in the body, because right now it's not really proportional to the fonts in the body. But that is another video, and I actually have another video on responsive font sizing. But that, I really wanted to just kind of show you how it worked from going from one layout to a smaller layout. And really the main thing you want to do is you want to reconfigure your layout, right? With the end goal of it being one column because on a phone, nearly everything is going to read well in one major column. Using multiple columns on a cell phone typically is not going to look good. So hopefully that was helpful. Just to kind of recap, media query, just at media screen, set the max width, and then you can make any CSS changes, and basically you can think of these as CSS overrides, right? You're overriding whatever the previous style was. So a couple things. One, it's really important to know what your previous style was, right? So if it's not looking right when you're resizing things, it's likely because you've got some CSS style, some default CSS style on there. So in order to really sort of know how to reconfigure things, you're going to have to consider and know your HTML and CSS pretty intimately. Hope that was helpful. I feel like it was a little confusing, but good luck either way. Feel free to email me if you have questions. Thanks.